What's up, guys? Welcome to another community chat with me, your friend, Bucky Dillon. What's up, guys? I hope you guys are having the most wonderful evening. This is a community chat. What does that mean? That means that you guys are in the driver's seat. So we don't have anything specific that we're planning to talk about. We're hoping that you guys will help guide the conversation by hanging out with me in the comment section and letting us know what you want to know or what you want to talk about, and how we can just get along together. So I'm going to play our little intro video while a few more people join the chat, and then I'm going to introduce a friend of mine. I hope you guys enjoy the show. LibertyRevoltMedia.com. And we're live. Baltimore, how you doing, man?
Hello. I am doing well. How are you, Mr. Bucky?
I'm fantastic. So
good.
We got a couple people already watching. The first thing they're going to want to know is, who are you and what's up with the sparkly hat?
I needed a hat that said I was both a Republican and that I was gay. And so why not rhinestone up a MAGA hat? And here it is. As you mentioned, my name is Valdemar. I am the president of the Log Cabin Republicans of Colorado. We are what I like to call the fabulous side of the Republican Party and the sane side of the LGBTQ community. Basically your conservative gays, the gaytriots, as someone once called me as an insult, and I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna take that. I like that." A lot of insults I get called, I'm like, "Oh, like I kind of like that." Someone called me an anti-Tom once. I'm like, "Oh, I kind of like that too. I'm gonna call myself that from now on."
An anti-Tom?
Anti-Tom.
Oh, anti. Wait.
As in like Uncle Tom, but a woman.
Okay.
So I'm gay and I'm an aunt. Okay. I don't know.
Anti-Tom.
But I like
okay.
Interesting. Yeah, you get a lot of things like that. I'm actually fairly new to the Republican conservative world. I was basically an independent, at least registered an independent for a long time. Up to like 5 years ago, I pretty much voted Democrat and was more liberal in my viewpoints in that until recently. I think things last summer especially, got kind of crazy a little bit around, especially in our cities. And living here in Denver, I saw my city turn into something that I was really not happy with. And so I took that step that I need to do something to get involved. I reached out to the Log Cabin Republicans, registered as a Republican, and next thing you know, a few months later, I was the president somehow.
Hey, sometimes that's how those things go. I'm a libertarian. I'm a registered libertarian. I started out as a Bernie bro progressive early in my kind of journey into politics. And this was mostly because, honestly, I had never really heard any other perspectives. Even though I had, my whole family was conservative, and I had heard them talk about politics before. I used to ride in the truck with my dad, and I would hear him listen to Rush Limbaugh and stuff. But, I didn't really listen. So I didn't actually hear it, and I didn't really care. And it wasn't until I got into on Facebook early on, and this was right when the very progressive groups were getting popular, right? Yeah. Vox was super popular. Huffington Post was super popular. Now this. And I started watching a lot of those videos. and I felt like it was easy to digest, right? They identified things that seemed like real world problems. They were obviously problems: wealth inequality, racism, student loan debt. And then they would, propose these utopian one size fits all ideas that could be fit down into a morally charged slogan like, healthcare should be a right of everyone, regardless of the income of their family, right? And I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds nice. Like, who could be against that? How could you possibly be against these progressives if they just want to do the right thing, right? And I didn't understand what public policy actually meant or what government control of an industry actually meant. But I just felt like that was, Bernie Sanders actually cared about people and everybody else just doesn't. They're all just corrupt crony politicians.
Yeah, and his message does resonate with a lot of people, and it is something that gets people's attention. There's an emotional aspect to it that is very appealing, and I completely understand that. I actually was really not into politics much at all. Growing up, I grew up a Jehovah's Witness, and Jehovah's Witnesses are very non-political, so I knew nothing. I didn't even know, like, I wouldn't even have known the difference between right-wing and left-wing politics. I didn't know what a conservative was, what a liberal was, because I never looked into it. And then I won't go into the whole story there, but I'm gay, so the Jehovah's Witnesses kicked me out of the church, and I ended up getting involved with the Pride Center in Colorado Springs, and working towards gay rights, and that kind of took the place of the church. And I didn't really question stuff. I just went along with what they told me. Like, this is good. These guys are good. Those guys are bad. And I was like, all right, it makes sense to me. And same thing, kind of like you were talking about with Bernie. They would talk to me about equal rights and different civil rights things, and it made sense to me. Of course, at the time, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was still in place in the military, and marriage equality had not happened yet. So those were two big things that I worked with the Pride Center that we were kind of fighting for. And I didn't, like, as far as the workings of politics, I didn't even think about it. I just did kind of what I was told. Like, all my gay friends are Democrats, they're all liberals, then this must be the right thing to do. And I just kind of went along with it. As many people do.
Yeah, I mean, I remember getting really, really swept up in the Bernie Sanders movement, 2016. I'd basically gotten all my political opinions from, like, my favorite rock bands, Rage Against the Machine, System of a Down, and the message was basically George Bush bad. Well, yeah, that was basically the message, right? And
that was pre-Orange Man bad.
Right, yeah, George Bush bad, and the whole country is racist and bigoted and homophobic and all of these things. And I remember just really buying everything that the media was saying about Trump and that the far left was saying about Trump at the time. And it was right before the election when I visited my grandfather's house, and my grandma and grandpa told me that they were planning to vote Trump, and I was shocked and appalled. I was absolutely horrified. I was like, here, this is my grandparents they're KKK members. They're evil, right? They're just like, they're Nazis, all this. And I tried to convince them that socialism was such a great idea. I remember talking about wealth inequality. I remember trying to say that, well, socialism is great because it just means it's just the human family coming together to solve problems. And my grandpa, tried to very patiently explain to me, well, in order to give the government enough power to solve these problems, you give the government enough problems to take care of you, right? Like, you let the government take care of you, they're going to take care of you. Yeah. And so I remember getting so angry, and he started talking about how all these different countries where the same promises had been made, and it just turned into government tyrannizing over the people and actually stifled economic development and stifled innovation and progress and put people deeper into poverty, and made the inequality that's actually dangerous, political inequality, much stronger. So I didn't really know what to do with this. I remember calling him a racist and storming out of the house, and I was like physically shaking mad for days, and I was just disgusted. And I remembered like feeling that grossness of being that angry and just filled with like hate, right? And then, like most people, I kind of blamed that on them. I was like, it's because of them. My feelings are justified. It's because of them, right?
Yeah.
And these are my grandparents who have literally never mistreated a human being in front of me ever, right? They've maybe done some things that I thought was dumb or ignorant, or they were rude because they were ignorant of the situation, right? But I've never seen them treat anyone with any maliciousness at all whatsoever, or wish any ill will towards anyone. And then that's right when I started becoming a full-time musician, and I ended up traveling around to all of the red states, right? I was in every small town, Nebraska, Wyoming, Montana, Iowa, Idaho, Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas, all over the Midwest in these bands. And I was actually spending each evening in a different small town bar, in a coal town, in a ranching town, and just these little white, blue collar, middle America cities, and in the bar with the working class men. And I went into it expecting that I was going to meet this vicious caricature that had been painted in my own mind with the help of these progressive media establishments, convincing me that all of these red states were just vicious, evil deplorables, right? But I was sitting down, and I never once felt like they were. Some of them laughed at me when I talked about being a Bernie bro. Some of them told me I was an idiot. Some of them tried to talk to me and just said, was like, you're misguided, man. But I never once met a racist. I never once met a vicious bigot. I just met guys that wanted to work hard, save their money. They loved their religion, they loved their country, and they wanted to be free, and they wanted to take care of their families and be self-sufficient. I never once met this person that I thought existed, right?
Yeah.
And then I started rethinking things as I traveled to Oregon and Seattle and California, and started telling them about my experiences in these other places. And immediately I could see them like just kind of getting vicious. And it started occurring to me like I saw in them the same exact emotions that I had when I stormed out of my grandfather's house. For even saying, I didn't even say I agreed with them. I said I spent time with these people and they seemed like nice people, right? And that's literally all I said. And my friends in California and Oregon and Seattle would get like ugly towards me, right? For even suggesting that there are decent people who aren't progressive, right? And then I started like listening to conservative thinkers, and then I started listening to libertarian thinkers, and I started agreeing more and more. So I spent 2000. I didn't vote for Trump. I didn't vote for Hillary either, but I spent in between 2016 and 2019 pretty conservative. I edged towards conservatarian, but it started out, I got really conservative, and then I kind of got moderate conservative, and then I started getting like conservatarian, right? And now I'm a registered libertarian, and I've kind of settled here and realized that I think the established principles in the Libertarian Party are the most reasonable and consistent. And I feel comfortable staying here and pledging myself to activism in that realm.
And that's good. I love my libertarians. I think that we have a lot in common, and Really, like kind of going back to what you're talking about, the anger. I remember that was one of the first things I noticed. I used to be on the board of directors with the Colorado Springs Pride organization,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, which was basically a big gay rights organization in Colorado Springs. And one of our board members, she was this little lesbian lady who had more anger in her than I can like. It was amazing how much of that emotion can fit in that little package of this lady. I remember she would come out. I don't know, language wise, am I allowed to say things?
Yeah,
Like,
whatever you want.
okay, well, she used to always like I heard her say "suck my dick" more than I heard any guy say that. She would get so mad, and she would like start like literally like froth. Like there would be like spit bubbles coming out her mouth. She would be so angry, and she would just be screaming and yelling. And half the time, like I don't understand why she's mad. Like why? Like what brought on this anger? And it was very like to be like this is the person who's on my team. We're here together at this event representing our cause, and to see her act that way made me feel like I don't want to be here. Like I don't want to be a part of this. Like if this is how we're going to represent ourselves, I want to leave.
Right.
Um, and it wasn't just her. Like she was kind of an extreme, but there were other people who would act very similar. Like I just would see all this anger, and I'm like, why are we so angry? Like I understand we want to work towards making things better. Like I said at the time, you know, I don't know what the event was at that situation or whatever, but you know, there were things going on for like don't ask, don't tell, and marriage equality or whatever. And yes, I want that, but I don't feel like screaming and being angry and representing ourselves in this way that's so hateful is really going to make a difference when people watch us. And so that was definitely something that turned me off from being on the left with this group of individuals. And
So let me ask you, did you feel
yes,
like in your young life that the, I guess for lack of a better term, anti-gay or discriminatory against gay or exclusive towards gay was something that was profound in the Republican Party?
um, I think that it was, but I wasn't really involved or actively political at that time period. Because I'm not going to lie, looking back at the history of the Republican Party, especially through the 80s, 90s, and even into the 2000s, there were very anti-gay messages and messaging that was coming out of it. But also, I think a lot of that was reflective on society as a whole. Because even if you look at Barack Obama, when he ran for president the first time, he was against gay marriage, and he was open about it. And there's videos of him and Mr. Joe Biden as well saying things that they were against gay marriage because that was kind of just the stance everyone took at the time. And I feel like things evolved very, very fast the past like 10 years or whatever to get to where we are today. But like I told you in the beginning, like I was very apolitical through most of my life. I don't remember like I remember in the 90s because I grew up here in Colorado, people talking about Colorado being the hate state, and I didn't really understand fully what that whole thing meant. I remember making jokes about it, that it was funny that we were the hate state because I was a stupid teenage boy at the time or whatever. And so not recognizing that that was talking about, you know, taking rights away from gay people and what it transcended into later on. Um, so yeah, like there was that, not to deny that there may be a small fraction of people within the party who still have some growing to do, as I put it.
No, how much do you feel like that was um, people who thought that homosexuality was a sin and was kind of like a evangelical right kind of thing, and how much do you think of it was perhaps more like a, well, we don't want to put a traditional family on the same level as a gay family for the sake of rearing children?
Mm-hmm. Um, it's probably a combination of both, and I would say having grown up in a religion where we viewed homosexuality as a sin and it was something that was not allowed and ultimately got me thrown out of that religion, I have an understanding of that viewpoint. And right now, like I through my spiritual journey, I'm not very much of a religious person now. I lean more towards agnostic than anything else. I like the Taoist philosophy of things in life, but I definitely have a respect for religions and a respect for Christians because I also recognize that even though I was thrown out of that religion, thrown out of that church, that they are not bad people. Like the individuals within the religion themselves, they were my family, my friends, and I knew like they in their hearts are good people. It was kind of an ideology that they got wrapped up in that I don't
Wait a
agree
minute,
with.
wait a minute. So you're saying it's capable that somebody can have ignorant thoughts with moral implications and not be inherently immoral people? Really?
Yes, I am. And I think that today we are way too quick to label stuff. And especially you see the terms homophobic or racist or misogynist thrown around way too freely. Someone just may do something or say something that has a racist background to it or undertone to it. It does not mean that that individual is a racist. Or same thing with
Sure.
homophobia or misogyny. We are very quick to label these people as basically demonizing them. And really what that does is I feel like it dilutes the actual word and dilutes the actual meaning of these things, because if we just throw it around to everyone, it loses the substance behind it. But I do definitely recognize that, someone can feel these things about, I don't know, about gay people, and doesn't mean they're a bad person. I used to work at the YMCA. When I first left, well, I got kicked out of the church. I got kicked out of the church and I moved to Colorado Springs. One of the first jobs I got there was as a lifeguard at the YMCA. And I worked there in the morning, and we had a lot of little old ladies would come in and do their water aerobics. And they became, very friendly. Like we would see them every day. We'd talk to them, have a good conversation and all. And one day, somehow, I don't remember how, but they found out I was gay. And one of the ladies came up to me and gave me a hug. And she said, "I still love you, but you are going to hell." And one of the other lifeguards was like so offended. Like, how could she say that? And I was like, no, like, that's all I want from her. Like the fact that she said, "I still love you," and gave me a hug and did not care that I was gay to do that. That was fine. The fact that she threw in, like, "You're going to go to hell anyway" afterwards, I don't care if that's what her thought is. That can be her moral belief or her religious belief. I just want respect. Like that's really all it is. And um, like okay, like again, I'm saying I'm gay. People don't like it. That's okay. Like I do not need, nor do I want their permission to live my life. I just want the freedom to do so. And in return, I will give them the freedom to think what they want. And it's kind of like a mutual respect there. And I really think that's what America is about, is like allowing people to have the freedom to live the life they want, to have the beliefs they want. But, as long as we're not like hurting people or, killing people or anything, like we allow our fellow Americans to have the same freedoms we do. So that's where
Yeah,
I am.
it's one of those situations to where, um, I personally, by the time I started coming into conservatism,
Mm-hmm.
I actually didn't know any up and coming conservatives who were like had a problem with gay people, right? I still think maybe there's like some old contingency of it, but
Mm-hmm.
when I look around and I see at least what I experience in my life, and maybe it's because I'm primarily in a blue state, but I did travel and spend a lot of time in red states, and I am surrounded by conservative people. Um, I just feel like the much bigger threat to people right now is actually on the other side of that, right? It seems like there's no consequences whatsoever to calling somebody a racist or a homophobe or a transphobe or a bigot or whatever it is, right? There's no consequences on the person saying that, other than they themselves feel like, because they're putting somebody else down for immoral implications, that they themselves must be absolved of those immoral implications, and they're therefore better than you. Whereas on the other way around, there is tremendous social consequences to being labeled a racist or a homophobe or whatever. So it's really easy to go around castigating people with all these slanderous, vicious words, and making yourself feel good. And it's really hard to be on the other side of that. But as far as I can tell, it is probably more, it's just as morally repugnant to go around calling decent, regular people racist, bigoted homophobes than it is to actually be a racist, bigot, or a homophobe, right?
No, I agree. I mean, most people would agree that those term to be a racist, like an actual, not just this casual way we throw it around, but to really be a racist is a bad thing. And to label someone that is really to smear that person in a way that we shouldn't take it so lightly. To label someone that, it should be something that is saved for kind of extreme cases that really merit that term, and not just thrown around the way that it is. Mr. Brandon here, which is a great name right now. We love the name Brandon. It's very popular. But he asked a good question. He asked me what led to being part of the Republican Party, or why I'm a Republican. I was going to talk about this a while ago, and I kind of forgot, because you were talking about how your experiences in that led you to becoming a libertarian. And honestly, if I look at the platforms in that of the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party, I do admit I probably fit more into a libertarian as far as the philosophy that I have. The reason I registered as a Republican and started working with Republicans is basically my viewpoint, though, of political parties. I think people take them too much, almost like they view them like a religion. Like when you join one, you must submit to everything that this party believes. You must agree with everything that it says. And I do not believe that. Right. I believe that political parties are basically tools of proxy powered by numbers. They are representative of a group of people. I don't have to agree with the other Republicans. I don't have to agree with everything on the platform. But we work together to get certain things done. And I just felt that the Republican Party was going to be a better tool to get things done, even though maybe philosophically in my head and that I probably lean more towards a libertarian philosophy of things. And I really feel, though, right now in the Republican Party, there's kind of a libertarian infiltration happening. Because there's a lot of people who I see who they do lean more towards that libertarian viewpoint of things.
Well, and you actually have successful libertarians who run for office and get into office as Republicans.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of think of it the opposite. You look at the opposite end. Look how the Socialist Party has kind of infiltrated the Democrat Party, because they recognize running as a socialist probably is not going to get you anywhere. But you have people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, who are openly Democratic socialists, but they kind of don't talk about that. They're like, that's kind of on the back burner. They go through the Democrat Party to use it, again, as a tool to get things done. And on the other side, we kind of have this. So people will ask me that, before, like I'll get asked that a lot. Like, how can you support different people in the Republican Party who maybe some of the people who are kind of extreme in some of their viewpoints? And I say that, like, just because I'm a Republican does not mean I have to agree with everything that every other Republican says or does. Obviously, I have this hat. I was a supporter of Donald Trump. But even with him, I didn't agree with everything he said or did. And I think it's kind of ignorant to feel you have to. I feel like if anyone says they believe everything a certain party stands for, or everything a certain party or a certain political individual, a politician believes, is probably because they're not thinking for themselves. They're just going along with what that person or politician says.
So this guy is commissioning some artwork for me that I've been trying to get commissioned for a long time. I totally understand why artists are starving. It's impossible to hire them. They just flake out. Even you offer them money and they don't know what to do. They're just like, I like starving.
Well, that's the thing. You get a good artist, they're going to be that creative mentality. It's hard to rope it into the business world. Like, all right, here's money. You do this, and do your thing. I've also I know an artist who, like myself, I'm a photographer. I do a lot of photography, and I kind of hate that. Like, I don't like doing weddings. I don't like doing portraits and that because it ropes you into this. I must take these pictures that fit this. It limits your creative freedom and what you really want to do do it. I must take these pictures. I must do this. And I hate it. I hate it. I hate doing weddings. I do not do weddings. Although I say that once in a while I get roped in by friends to do their weddings. So I understand the artist in you does not want to.
So, I have to push you
those business boundaries.
I have to push you because, I'm a libertarian and I'm looking to expand the libertarian movement. Mm-hmm. Why not libertarianism if you agree with the principles more?
I feel like just right now we don't have a lot of time. I think the way the world's going, we need to get things done now. And the Republican Party's already established. It's already there. And like I said, I see a growing move. I have faith in the future of the Republican Party becoming something that's more in line with who I am than what it is right now. But also being a free thinker, even if I were to become a libertarian, I would have a lot of the same issues with them. There'd be things with the Libertarian Party and the libertarian movement that I don't agree with that I would also have to have.
I agree with you.
I'd have to deal with. But that's the thing. That's why I tell people, like, we need to stop viewing political parties like they're religions. It's okay for us within our parties to disagree with each other. It's okay for us to have different infighting. That's healthy, I think. When you see, like, people will like throw it out in people's faces that, oh, look at the Republicans fighting with each other. And like, sometimes that's good. We need to hash these things out and kind of find out where we're going to line up. And it's also okay for the different Republicans to disagree with each other. And the same thing with libertarians and the same thing with Democrats, that that's all right.
Well, gosh, it's almost as though that's the whole point in free speech.
Exactly.
So this is a community chat, and I want to get your response to some of these comments. Okay.
Okay. Is there specific?
So let's go to Brent.
I know there was a few that come up that I just did not quite see.
I would agree with Brent. I'm a libertarian.
Liberals yell at me. Conservatives yell at me.
Yeah.
I would agree with that as well. For example, that's like, I feel like we put kind of some of these groups together. Like, we say, if you're a Democrat, you're a leftist, and you're a liberal. If you're a Republican, you're a rightist, and you're a conservative. And I think those three labels do not necessarily coincide with each other. Like, I am registered a Republican, but I don't really feel like Republican and Democrats on a spectrum. It's just kind of like which team you joined. And right and left in politics, I do lean right, but I also don't know if I feel like I'm a conservative in some ways. Just because, I mean, I'm gay, I'm an atheist. I'm a photographer and my art is very gay. It's
Right.
not very conservative artwork that I do. My whole life has not really been very, at least once I left the religion, not super conservative, but I feel like I kind of lean more towards the liberal side than at least classically liberal, like what liberal actually means. I feel like a lot of times today, people label themselves,
Libertarian. Right.
yeah, who we call liberals are not liberals, because liberals should be about freedom and should be about
Right.
being who you
Openness.
are. Yeah, and so I feel like I do lean more liberal than conservative. Um, yeah, you do have both sides who yell at people, and that can be just as frustrating. I've had conservatives yell at me more online in social media than actually in person. I've gotten into it with several conservatives, such as the Groypers. If you know who they are, the Groypers do not like me. Most of them have blocked me on social media.
Yeah, I
I've
don't know
gotten
who they
into
are.
it with Bryson Gray a few times. Amazingly, he has not blocked me yet, so good for him. Um, but like I said, it is what it is. I think that there are going to be things we disagree on, and we shouldn't yell at each other. Sometimes emotions get us to that point, but it's okay to disagree, and it's okay to do all that.
Well, that's
Well,
how we
that's how
pursue the
we
truth.
pursue the truth.
You have
You
to.
have to.
I hear myself
I hear
echoing on
myself.
your side, by the way. I don't
On
know if
my
I put
side,
your speaker. Oh, and it went away. Anyways,
I was going to put headphones on if that helps.
yeah, I'm going to agree with him here. Republicans are Democrats that run as libertarians. I do think the real line is drawn. Do you believe in state control, government control, or do you believe in individual choice? Right? The
Mhm.
libertarians are all the way individual choice. Half the Libertarian Party is like anarcho-libertarianists, right? They're anarcho-capitalists. They believe the government shouldn't exist at all.
Ron
And then
Swanson,
you have the minarchist wing of
and I
the
love
libertarian
Ron
party.
Swanson, by the
Um,
way.
I think I would be closest to a minarchist libertarian, which is essentially the government's only legitimate roles is to protect the principles of self ownership, private property, and individual rights. And in order to do that, in order to establish that code of ethics, you have to establish at least a minimum of a police force uh, and a military, right? So
Mhm.
Kevin has been trying to sell me on the anarchy thing for a long time. I've listened to Dave Smith, I've listened to Karen Ann Harlos, I've listened to Kevin, I've listened to a bunch of the Mises Caucus guys, and I'm just not at the anarchy level yet. It just hasn't sold me. I don't see how you could make
Well,
something sustainable with that. And this is going to be an ongoing conversation I have with them, trying to figure out, well, just how limited is limited government while still being able to function as a society. Because the problem I see with it is if you can withdraw your consent all the way down to the individual, and that any individual at all can just determine that they don't want to abide by any of the rules and laws of their community, then how can you have a community, right?
yeah.
If you are to establish even the principles of self ownership and private property, you kind of have to figure out how you're going to establish on some level a monopoly on force. That's what government is essentially. It's a monopoly on violence, right? So how do you mitigate that while simultaneously protecting certain rights? Um,
Hmm.
I think it is a necessary evil. I don't see how you do it, but I also do agree that it's kind of a gray area and it's kind of a violation of right. There is no community without the individual. I agree with that, and there
Yeah.
needs to be individual rights. That being said, right, what if the individuals next door decide that the age of consent for women is like the age of consent, as in like from childhood to adult, to be able to make their own decisions, is
Mhm.
50? right? And your next door neighbor decides that his daughter can't consent to his own decisions, and he's going to violate her self ownership and her private property rights and rape her every day, all the time, around the clock. At what point is it legitimate for you to monopolize force against him?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
No, I agree. There has to be.
And how are you going to do that? Are you just going to have mob rule where it's okay? Well, we don't need the government for that because I'll go over and do that. Well, what if they've decided that they have their own little community there and they don't believe in private property, they don't believe in consent or these things, and the wife says you're guilty, right? These things
that's when it would become. That's, and it's funny that
by establishing pseudo governments.
Yeah, because then you really take that form of mob rule is actually what a true democracy would be. Like, the biggest group of people get to make the decisions, and they force their way upon other people. It is something that I think throughout human history we're always going to have to constantly debate it, because there does have to be some kind of structure.
Well, how do you how do you set up courts in a anarcho society? Just mob rule. Let's say two guys decide they don't like each other, and one of them shoots each other, but nobody really knows what actually happened. Maybe you have like a couple witnesses, and they're like, well, it was that guy's fault, and 5 witnesses says it was that guy's fault, 5 witnesses says it was that guy's fault. I mean, how do you have a legal system without establishing some ground rules? And those ground rules can only be enforced by some kind of legislature and some kind of police force. Otherwise, it's just a he said, she said mob rule.
It is. And I don't know. It does. Like I said, there does have to be some kind of basic system or a basic set of rules that we agree that we're going to live by. It does become complicated when you have a lot of people who have such different viewpoints. I forget which podcast it was I was listening to a week or two ago, where they had an anarchist on. But he wasn't, like, I would say, like a true anarchist, because he did have a system in place. There was a system that everyone was going to live by. And I actually thought a lot of his concepts were very good, and I agreed with him on a lot more than you would have thought that I would agree with him on. But I did agree with him on a lot of stuff. Some things I think he probably took a little too far, but it was an interesting conversation he was having. And I definitely am someone who believes the government right now is way too big, and it needs to be drawn back a lot. And how that gets done, I don't know, in some ways, what we need to do we need people in government who are going to have the balls to do it, to just say, all right, this is going to be something that has to stop, and has to be changed. And I don't know, a lot of our politicians just don't have that strength to them right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that libertarian values need to ripple out through the community before libertarian politics even work, right?
Yeah, like I definitely I love libertarian philosophies and ideas, and I love my libertarians. Within our group of the Log Cabin Republicans, we actually have quite a few libertarians.
And this is one thing I've noticed, because I've hung out in the Republican circles and I've hung out in the libertarian circles, and it seems like when I hang out with a bunch of Republicans and I tell them I'm libertarian, they go, okay, right? If I go over to my libertarian friends and you even say the word Republican or conservative, you might as well say, like, I suck the blood of children.
Only sometimes.
You might as well say, like, I caught syphilis raping people, like they treat you like the plague. Yeah, but is dueling justice? Or is dueling just whoever has the fastest trigger win, gets to decide for everyone.
Yeah,
Dueling,
it's really about who's going to be best at that.
Justice that's dependent not on actual justice, but on monopolizing force isn't justice.
So, yeah, because dueling say it's going to be like who's better at that talent, like who has that skill better than the other one. That's the person. Is that what the justice is going to be based on? Is who has the skill? Of course, right. We all have the opportunity to develop that skill if we want to.
Right. So let's play this out. Vladimir decides that he's bigger and stronger. He's going to go up to Bucky and he's going to tackle him to the ground. He's going to penetrate him. It's going to be awful. It's going to be messy. I'm having a real rough time, And then I say, well, this is a violation of self-ownership and private property. I challenge you to a duel. And then Vladimir shoots me. Was justice served, right?
Why am I doing that in this story? What a horrible thing.
As you have said, aggression is always wrong. Yeah.
But if you were in that situation, why would I take the time to stop? If I already have you down and I'm doing it, why go through the dueling process? Because then no matter what the outcome, I'm not going to get what I want.
You did it. It's done. The next day, I'm like, you know what, man? I really didn't like that. I challenge you to a duel. As you said, aggression is always wrong. Okay, well, how do you are we just because we can't assume that everybody can equally project force.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I wouldn't say aggression's always wrong.
So what if the guy who has the fastest guns and the strongest arms and the best cardio and the best equipment, right? We're talking about some billionaire who's never had to work a day in his life. All he's done is train his guns and train his body and train his mind to be the ultimate warrior. Right? Yeah, you can say aggression is always wrong, but he can kick your ass. He makes the rules.
Through much of human history, that was kind of the way it went. Like whoever was the strongest wins.
Right. Whoever gets the biggest, most aggressive, capable mob together.
So how do we? And that's
you can say it's a moral thing, but how do you establish you have to, in order to enforce your moral code, in order to enforce your non-aggression principle, you have to be able to physically defend it. Physically defending it means, to some extent, establishing your own monopoly on violence. How do we do that? Well, we're going to have to create a common set of rules. We're going to all have to agree upon those rules, or at least enough of us agree upon those rules. And then we're going to have to try to come up with whether a private or a public police force or apparatus of force. We're going to have to try to monopolize force in order to protect rights.
Yeah, that's the rough thing when it comes to like looking at a moral argument, is who decides what the moral is.
Right. My wife is 5 feet tall and 97 pounds. She can say she believes in the non-aggression principle. If I don't, that sucks for her. What's she going to do about it?
I agree. They said that's where it comes in with this. Like there has to be some kind of established set of rules and an established, at least a general code. We don't have to like create a moral code that dictates every little aspect of our life, but like the big stuff needs to be somehow documented that this is the rules.
To Jeff Benjamin, it's really easy. He's going to go around to every single one of his neighbors and he's going to declare that, hey, Bucky's over there abusing his wife and violating her rights and violating the non-aggression principle. We're going to kick his door down and we're going to physically stop him. Right? So in doing so, Jeff just established a monopoly on force.
Yeah. That's true. If you want your moral outlook and your moral viewpoint to be the precedent that everyone has to live by, you have to have the force to back up your viewpoint. Because then when someone breaks that moral code, you have to enforce that moral code. And it's either going to be in your own personal strength or in the numbers that you have with you. And then again, it brings into the question like who decides what the moral code is? Is it going to be mob rule just by numbers, or is it going to be by strength and assets? Because then you could have one person who just has all the weapons, and that one person alone
Right.
makes up
Now,
the
a Second
strength.
Amendment is how you hold that monopoly on force responsible, right? But here's the problem, Jeff. We can't just vanquish force from the world, right? I wish that we could just literally everybody on the planet just agrees, I don't get to hurt you and you don't get to hurt me, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not reality. If we look at human nature, it has been human nature and human history. It has been nonstop tyranny and slavery and bloodshed forever, without exception, right? We have people that try to say, well, that's an economic thing. Trust me, we had bloodshed before we had currency, right?
Yeah.
There has, as long as man has realized he's stronger than women, there's been rape in the world. Um, what I'm saying, Jeff, is you can say that, well, in a perfect world, I don't get to hurt you and you don't get to hurt me or anyone else. Well, what happens? Let's say a real pandemic swipes through the United States and only the three of us live. Myself, you, and Vladimir here, and we decide that we are going to live by libertarian principles and we're getting along just fine. And then the Chinese show up and they say, you know what? We're going to use you for slave labor. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it?
This is an interesting story you just brought up. There'd be nothing we could do about it. Like they have the strength, we go along with it. Like there's
right. So
whether it's right or
in order to protect, how can you protect these principles without trying to in some way monopolize force? And how do you monopolize force in a way that is fair? And in a way that most reduces the risk of that force being used to tyranny.
I don't know.
Jeff, you just answered that by saying, well, you don't get to do that. It's called morality. Well, we don't live in a moral world.
That goes to like what we were talking about earlier before we started this, that like the whole idea of socialism and modern monetary theory is based on it goes against human nature, and it goes against this. It's created on this idea that we live in a utopia where everyone's just perfect and everyone's loving and nice, and that's just not the reality of the world that we live in. It's not reality of human, and it's not just human nature. It's animal nature. Like look at nature. The things animals do. It's about survival. Look at even plants will kill other plants to survive. Like this is just within our makeup to survive. Some of these things are going to happen. And if we want to control that nature within us, we need to come up with guidelines, and there has to be someone to force or enforce, which the word force is in that word, enforce those morals that we come up with. Because if not, like what's the punishment? If like say like you're back in that scenario where there's just the three of us and you have something I want, so I go punch you in the head and take it. And you're like, well, that's not nice. You're not supposed to do that. I'm like, yeah, well, what you gonna do about it? If I did it. And then if no one does anything about it, I'm like, well, I can go punch your head and take something else. It worked last time. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again until the Chinese come in and make me their slaves.
Right. How do we set up an apparatus in which we can best ensure the common defense?
Yeah.
Without
if you did set
best
something
ensuring our own tyranny.
Like, all right, Valdemar, you broke the rule. So then the two of you together are bigger than me. You can do something to me to make me learn my lesson. Like, all right, you broke the rule. You two are going to get up together and enforce whatever punishment was agreed upon me. That'll put me back in line, and then we go about our way. But there has to be an agreed upon moral agreement between the people, and then there has to be a way to enforce that moral agreement.
Okay. Right. So hold on, Brent, it says, hold on. What are we talking about exactly? The right to use force. Um,
I'm glad you asked that because I was
Kind
kind of
of,
wondering
yes,
about that when
kind
I
of.
was talking,
I
Randy.
believe that the only legitimate use of force is in self-defense, is in defense of self-ownership, private property, and the right to, liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Um, but in order to ensure those rights, we constitute a government. So that's when Jeff comes in here. He says, well, the Constitution. Uh, Correct. But by establishing a constitution, by establishing a code of ethics and a code of law, you are determining that the Constitution set up the framework for a government. You can't have a constitution and no government.
Yeah. And the great thing about the Constitution is it's adaptable. So it was written with the ability to be amended as we grow, and for things to be changed as the society develops, and there are things that we agree upon. But there does have to kind of be that written, or it doesn't even have to be written, but it's an agreed upon moral code that society is going to live upon or live with.
And I'm going to be honest. The problem with the anarchy versus minarchy versus conservative limited government versus socialist government. I mean, I've gotten pretty good at arguing against the socialist governments and trying to minimize things. I have not. Maybe I'm just not smart enough. I want to find the most articulate, the sharpest anarchist capitalist I can possibly find and see if they can convince me. Kevin has tried. Karen has tried. I have had a good handful of smart, well-read, historically informed libertarians try to convince me of the anarchy thing, and
Mhm.
I am just, I'm
Are they
so
talking about
close.
total,
I'm
like total
I'm so
anarchy,
close. I am
like
so close,
complete?
man. I am like a laissez-faire capitalist almost all the way. There's only a few things that I see wrong with absolute free tradeism. And the only thing I see wrong with that is, for example, how do you have free trade? We're going to talk about China again. How do you have free trade while competing against a country that is subsidizing their products with slave labor, right? By violating human rights, right? You can't really have free trade with that. You have to put up some trade barriers in place. Uh, if they're utilizing slave labor and therefore can produce their product at a fraction of the cost that I can produce my product, we will never be able to compete in a free and fair market that way. But otherwise, I'm basically just all the way capitalist, which implies a political structure, because you can't have a big government and a capitalist system, because capitalism means the government only exists to protect private property, self-ownership, and individual rights. And beyond that, it's illegitimate. And the reason we have a Second Amendment is to make sure that the government does not get out of that little box, right?
Yeah,
Which means
and that's
in
kind of the
in a
thing.
capitalist government structure, there's no welfare, there is no bailouts, there's no socialism for the rich, there's no socialism for the poor, there's no price fixing, there's no price gouging, there's no I don't think we'll be on much more longer than this. There's no there's no trade barriers with countries that aren't playing by the same basic rules of adhering to self-ownership and private property. And again, those systems, I will agree with Jeff to some capacity. Those systems do have inherent flaws. When you let people freely, engage in pursuing their own self-interest through the production and exchange process, the market will be shaped in the most efficient way possible. Whereas if a government is taking people who are really efficient at one thing and enslaving them to do something else, they're not going to do it nearly as efficiently, and they're not going to be sustainable as they would if they just let people do their own thing. So I'll agree that doing things in an evil anti-human way has its inherent insustainabilities. Well, what I would not concede to, however, is back here you said look through history. Aggressors always lose eventually, right? But they tend to do a tremendous amount of damage along the way, and sometimes they don't totally lose, right? We thought we stopped the communists and the socialists after they murdered, what was it, a global total of something like 120 million people killed by socialism and communism. And yet here in our country, those ideas are blossoming at a rapid pace, right? So I mean, if
you look through history, one of the biggest aggressors in all of history was the Roman Empire, and there's arguably ways you can say they're still represented today, because the way they branched out, a lot of their branches are still alive and well and functioning, and a lot of the things we do today is based on a lot of the things they did. So what they did worked. They were aggressors, and so it may not be what some people would consider the most moral way of gaining power or the most moral way of spreading your influence around the world, but it does work. And that goes back to, is it moral? And that, like we were talking about earlier, just because something's immoral or immoral, the person who has the power gets to decide what's okay. And I forgot what I was about to say.
Okay. Jeff says this country started with socialism. Agree. Slavery is socialism. It's a violation of private property. It is when the governing structure decides that self-ownership and private property do not apply to this segment of the population for whatever arbitrary reason. And then they begin to steal their labor from them and redistribute the wealth created to other people. Slavery is socialism. This country started with socialism. Absolutely agree. We have never in the United States had a capitalist system. We especially don't have a capitalist system now. And what's really interesting is, and we are still suffering the consequences of it. Absolutely agree. What's really interesting is our socialist friends prop up failed socialist policies as the examples of failed capitalism. They'll prop up healthcare, they'll prop up education, and they'll prop up housing as the
all
three
the things that the government's
where
involved with
capitalism has failed the most. All industries with the highest level of government regulation, government involvement, and redistribution and other anti-capitalist policies. Right? Why is it that right here in my hand I hold a device with more computing power than the rockets that allegedly took man to the moon?
Is that where we're going now? Conversation we're gonna have.
while higher education and housing and healthcare have all gotten so very expensive, regardless of the high levels of innovation. It's government. I don't know if and sometimes it's not even our government involvement. Sometimes it's the government involvement of other countries. For example, because Canada and Norway and Denmark and other European countries and other places that have socialized healthcare, and in order to make their socialized healthcare function, they have to put price controls on it. Because they put price controls on their pharmaceutical drugs, that means that the pharma companies can't operate there at a profit, or at least they can't make the level of profit that they need to reinvest. So they charge higher prices here in the United States in order to subsidize all of the innovation that it takes to come out with these products and prop up these socialized healthcare systems around the world, right? Why do people in Canada get to utilize socialized healthcare? Well, it's because the United States is paying for almost all of the medical innovations that exist, right? The United States, I think, is responsible for like 57% of all the medical innovations that have come out like in the last century, and in the last century is responsible for like almost all of medical innovations ever. It's so sad. It's so complicated, but it's not that complicated. Get the government out of these industries totally.
I forget his name. There was a man. He was the Libertarian candidate for governor of New York the last election they had.
Yeah, I don't know
his name. But he had the best plan for education that I ever heard of, and I was like, he needs to be the education secretary, and he basically would be working himself out of a job with what he wants to do. But it is true. Everything that's getting super expensive is because the government's being more like too involved in that thing. The more the government gets involved, the worse it gets. And even like with education, and even medicine, and that I always think everyone's always talking about, well, we need to make new legislation, we need to go socialism, we need to get the government involved. How come it's never the fault of the industry or the school that's actually charging all this money? Like, why is it never talked about that? Well, why do I have to pay $200 for a book? Like, why is that company charging me $200? It's not their fault. It's the government's fault. And the way to solve the government problem is to get more government involved. It makes no sense at all, and it irritates me.
It's very true. It's very true.
Are we going to talk about the moon?
Are we going to talk about the moon? It sounds like y'all want us to talk about the moon.
Jason, I will say this. I think it's very odd that they've even admitted that we had the technology to go to the moon back in the 70s or whatever, the 60s, and now we don't because we lost it. The files got lost, so we can't do it. Like, that's weird to me. That's my own. That's all I'm going to say. But I do believe it happened. That's all I know.
I've never looked into it. Honestly, if it's fake, but it helped destroy socialist Russia, if it helped bankrupt them, I'm like, fair enough, man. I think it's much more morally acceptable to fake a moon landing than it is to bomb a country. So.
I would agree with that.
I don't know if that was just a ploy to win the Cold War. I guess if that works.
Yeah, they fell for it. Like, what? But I do ultimately, really, I think we went to the moon. I just think it's odd. There are some odd things with it. Like, it's odd that we never went back. Or that, like they've said, like we don't have that technology now. Like, how do we not have it now when we had it back then? I don't know.
It looked like it was filmed at Laverne and at the Laverne show.
Yeah, that flag was a little odd, but
I have no idea. We'll have to do a moon episode sometime. This seems like a popular subject. All in favor of a moon episode, say aye.
I would watch that. I would tune in for your moon episode.
Well, I will say to you, sir, I cannot afford to pay you 40-something plus hours. My budget for this art, I'm going to be honest, I was hoping I could buy it for like $200. But I'll tell you what, I'll $200 and multiple episodes of the Liberty Revolt, revolving around topics of your choice, and I want you to appear on the show. By the way, you guys should all go subscribe to Asian Guy Flog on YouTube. I'm gonna go look it up.
We'll have to go check that out.
He actually does come out with some pretty good videos. I've been watching his videos recently. got good ones, man. I'm trying to find the right one. I don't think this one is it.
What is the content usually on his vlog?
It's just random stuff. Sometimes it's political. Sometimes it's not political. Sometimes, like he did one episode the other day where he literally talked about watching a dad save his toddler that fell in a pool, and how fast it was and how impressive it was to watch this guy just spring into action and save this toddler out of the pool, like before he could even process what was going on.
As a former lifeguard, I would like to watch that episode.
He doesn't have video of it. He just talks about watching it happen and his reaction to it. I can't find it. Hey, dude, just plug your YouTube channel in the comments. Where's my streamer? How do I get back?
That is probably true. It's not a priority to go to the moon anymore, so they're not going to give it money. Because it is one of those things. The first time you do it, it's amazing. The second time, it's not so exciting. But I don't know. After all this time, like, wouldn't it be like we can go get a better video from the moon than we had from back then? That might be worth it. Go take some cool photos from the moon.
Okay, yeah, here it is. Although I'm pretty sure there's at least a flag on the moon.
There was.
I think if we stopped, if the whole world were libertarians, we would already be colonizing Mars, because we wouldn't have been violating each other's rights this whole time, bombing each other to death. If we were libertarians, we'd already be on Mars. I'm disappointed in you people. You make me sick.
Yeah, but then who's going to take care of the poor disenfranchised people of the world?
Honestly, if we lived in a libertarian society, if you were poor and disenfranchised, here's the thing. I mean, this is going to sound cold and kind of shitty. I don't have very much sympathy for homeless people. I'm going to be honest. When I drive past someone homeless, the first thing I assume is, if there's obvious mental health problems, then maybe I kind of feel bad. But if they are like, and I mean, are there homeless people without serious mental? I don't know. But I got to say, like, if you have gotten to the point to where not a single person in the planet is willing to let you sleep on their couch or offer you a job, you have to be some kind of dickbag, right? Like, if you've gotten to the point where you've literally burnt the bridge with every other human being you've ever come in contact with, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a mental health issue. I don't think it's an economic issue necessarily, and I think it's a cultural thing. And I'm just kind of afraid to give them money. So my sister was like a gutter punk kid, and essentially what that meant is they would these were all like just fine, well-off, middle-class teenagers who would literally take off their Tommy Hilfiger clothes to put on some raggedy old sweatshirt vest thing, and then go on the streets and pretend to be homeless because they thought it was cool. And she told me about some of the scams they would pull. They seriously told me some wild stuff. Like, they would have people who they would have two of their friends wear their nice clothes and look nice, and then they would have two of their friends look homeless, and they would sit on the corner, and they would wait for a couple older middle-aged white women to like walk down the street who looked like they had money, and they would intentionally have their well-dressed friends come up and start harassing them, kick them, spit on them, whatever, while like people were watching, in order to elicit sympathy from those people and get money out of them. And I've also seen people like panhandle at my local Walmart throughout the course of the day. Like I would go there in the morning or a couple times, of course, to see them there, and then like see them like later on get into a really nice car and drive off. Like they're obviously doing better than me, right? And here's the thing. I mean, I actually would give money to like street performers or something, and I do have sympathy for people who need help, but I also think that help needs to be earned either through your moral character or through your effort, right? I don't care if you don't even have to do something. You could literally train your dog to do something. If you had your dog jumping through hoops and rolling over and doing like awesome tricks, I'd be like, okay, that's worth $5, right? But when I see someone literally just stand there with a sign that says anything helps and just sitting there on their ass, it's really hard for me to be like, okay, I'm going to give money to them, right? Because here's the thing, everybody in the world wants something. And unless you are completely physically incapable of providing any physical or mental service to anyone, there's really no excuse. At one point in my life, I was trying to pursue music full time, and in between paying gigs, my wife told me that I needed to get a real job. I didn't want to get a real job. I wanted to fuck around on my drums all day. And so I literally drove past a sign spinner on the side of the road, like spinning a sign for Liberty Mutual or something, and they looked depressed. They looked miserable. They were just standing there like, and I was like, wow, I don't want to go there. That's sad. But a little light bulb went off my head. I was like, wait a second. People will pay you to bring attention to their business, even if that means standing there on the side of the road trying to get people's attention. And a little light bulb went off. Ding. And I realized that, well, nothing gets attention like a drum set. I'm going to show you guys a video of me a few years ago, not too long ago, working my job. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's part of the whole creative
right here. Right here. Let me see if I can full screen this. I don't know if you guys can tell. That was me drumming in a Subway sandwich costume on the side of the road for $25 an hour, 8 hours a day. Maybe it's too bright. Maybe I'll turn down the brightness.
It is too bright.
I got Subway.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
$25 an hour to do that, right? What's the difference between that and holding a sign, other than the fact that I was actually servicing somebody's business in the process? And guess what? I put out a tip jar. I made $25 an hour plus tips, and I guarantee you, I got way more tips than the guy standing there doing this.
Yeah, I don't think that guy gets tips. I've seen some people who can do some really crazy, like baton thrower type stuff with those signs.
And that's badass. And they deserve every dollar that they get.
I find it impressive when I see them on the corner, like spinning that sign around and flipping it behind their back, and they're dancing and they're having a good time.
Right?
Did you see those creepy?
I worked for a dog grooming place.
Are you sure that's not just you and you were a furry?
I got a ton of people's attention. Oh yeah, and eventually,
have you seen those? Like I've only seen one in real life where they had a mannequin that did that, and it was a mannequin, and it's the creepiest thing I've ever seen. When it's literally a mannequin robot going like this.
Oh yeah,
with like a mannequin head, And you're like, that
Sometimes
is the
they try to
craziest.
make it look like a chick. They like put blonde hair on.
Yeah,
and
it's like
booty
this
shorts.
hot mannequin standing there going.
The awkwardly
I'm like,
hot
you know what?
mannequin. Yeah. I'll admit it.
The person with the
Hey,
least amount of enthusiasm does a better job than that stupid mannequin did. Going like,
oh, I will disagree. The awkwardly hot mannequin, I always stare. Like,
did you see the awkwardly hot mannequin? Here's this guy. Hey, buddy. I don't know. I do not like the awkwardly hot mannequin. I think it is weird. I do not like it.
Well, you're gay, so
I would prefer. It could be a hot guy mannequin. I do not like it. It is not okay. I disagree. Like, it's not okay.
Oh man, I'm serious.
If you like it, if you like that, you know what? That's you. I'm not gonna. That you be you. Freedom, liberty. If your mannequins are your thing, go for it.
Anyways, guys, if you guys want to keep having conversations down there, feel free. It has been almost an hour and a half. I try to keep these things, 45 minutes to an hour, 15 tops. And that's because I do have a family and I have a ton of work to do. I'm going through sales training.
You just couldn't stop talking to me. That's all.
I know, it's true.
Okay. I'm so fascinating.
My Valley boy is irresistible. Right on, guys. We're going to let you go. Final thoughts?
I think we just, whatever teams we end up on, whatever place we end up in life. I recently read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, and one of the things he said is the biggest enemy to individual freedom is individuals themselves. We need to be willing to work together, like I said, wherever we are, to fight for that freedom, even if it makes, unusual bedfellows, as the saying goes. Freedom is what it is. Whatever is going to give us the most freedom, whatever is going to allow us to achieve that. We're not enemies, whether we're libertarians, Republicans, conservatives, liberals, whatever. If we want freedom, we love our country. We're not each other's enemies. Let's work together and get it done.
Right on, right on. Yeah, I'm going to be pushing for approval voting or ranked choice voting specifically for that reason, is because I would like to pursue, as a libertarian, I would like to pursue libertarian ideas and libertarian policies, but I'm also in Weld County, and that means that the Republicans are barely holding on to this thing, and a lot of the Republican positions here in Weld County are actually very, very sympathetic to libertarianism. So it's like I wouldn't want to sabotage my local libertarians and waste my vote. So I'm going to be pursuing approval voting and other things so that people can actually make their voices heard. And I think that if people could actually vote for the candidates they liked, even if they didn't, even if they had concerns about the utility of that political party, they'd probably be a lot less concerned with the political party labels. And they would be a lot less divisive to each other as well. I think the two-party system really forces us into two cultural camps that is really not healthy.
Yeah, I think that if we did come up with some kind of ranked voting, it would be great for that reason, because you can.
Because then instead of trying to appeal to your specific base, you try to appeal to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right now we have a system in which you have to make it as uncomfortable as possible to vote for the other guy and as easy as possible to vote for your guy. And you do that by making your opponent look like literally Hitler. And in the case of the Democrats and Republicans, they might as well fucking be literally Hitler. or make their constituencies feel bad about voting for them and feel bad about anybody else who may vote for them. So if we had approval voting, people could come together on issues and be much more united, I think. Anyways, I'm going to get out of here.
I agree.
I love you guys. We don't always have to agree on everything. I really appreciate the conversations, though. I'm going to keep thinking things through and keep honing my opinions with the help of you guys. And that's why I like to do these community chats. So I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.